America is not giving Australia submarines out of generosity. It is buying geography. It is buying time. It is buying another undersea front in the one ocean where distance can decide the future of a war before the first missile ever leaves a launcher. Because in the Indo Pacific, a submarine is not just a weapon. It is a moving shadow that can listen, wait, threaten, and disappear. And when that shadow belongs to an ally, it does something even more powerful. It stretches American power without painting another American flag on the map. That is the hidden logic of AUKUS. The United States is helping build someone else's submarine fleet because, in the next great military contest, no country wants to hold the entire line alone. This is Battletech Declassified. Modern Warfare. Explained. Picture the Pacific, not as blue water, but as a giant chessboard made of distance. Every square is enormous. Every move takes time. Guam is far from Australia. Hawaii is farther. San Diego is almost another world. China sits near the center of the board, close to its shipyards, bases, missiles, and airfields. America sits across the ocean, powerful but stretched. Now place Australia on the lower edge of that board. Quiet, stable, allied, close enough to matter, far enough to survive. AUKUS is what happens when Washington looks at that map and realizes a simple truth. It does not only need more submarines. It needs more places where undersea power can live, reload, repair, train, and return. The headline says America is building someone else's submarine fleet. The deeper story is stranger. America is helping Australia become a submarine power, so the alliance itself becomes a weapon. To understand AUKUS, forget the usual image of an alliance. Do not picture 3 flags at a press conference. Picture 3 factories trying to breathe through the same steel lung. Picture shipyards, reactor specialists, welders, crews, inspectors, ports, nuclear safety teams, and intelligence networks slowly being connected into one long undersea supply chain. AUKUS is not just a deal where Australia buys submarines from America like a customer buying aircraft from a catalog. That would be too simple. This is closer to teaching a trusted partner how to join one of the most protected military clubs on Earth. Nuclear-powered submarine operations are among the hardest things a Navy can do. The boat must be silent. The reactor must be safe. The crew must be elite. The maintenance culture must be almost obsessive. One lazy mistake does not just break a machine. It can expose a nation's most valuable military secrets. That is why AUKUS matters far beyond the hulls. A diesel-electric submarine can be deadly, especially near home waters, but it has limits. It must manage battery life. It must think about air, fuel, speed, and time in a different way. A nuclear-powered attack submarine changes the equation. It can stay underwater for far longer. It can cross huge distances without needing to surface for air. It can move fast, then slow, then vanish. It is like comparing a sniper hiding in one building to a ghost that can move through an entire city without stopping. For Australia, this means reach. For Britain, it means a next-generation submarine program tied to Allied technology. For America, it means a friendly undersea force growing in the exact region where geography is becoming a battlefield. But here is the twist. The most important submarine in AUKUS may not be a submarine at all. It may be the industrial network required to keep one alive. The obvious question is simple. Why would America share something this sensitive? The United States does not casually hand out nuclear propulsion know-how. It has guarded that world for decades because the technology is not just powerful, it is strategic. A nuclear-powered submarine is a national secret wrapped in steel. Its reactor design, acoustic signature, combat systems, sensors, maintenance routines, and crew practices all reveal how a Navy thinks. Sharing that with another country is not like selling tanks. It is like giving someone access to the basement of your fortress and saying, "We trust you enough to help guard the door." That is why AUKUS is so unusual. It is not only a military transaction, it is a trust transaction. America is doing it because the Indo Pacific problem is too large for one fleet to solve alone. Think of the region like a massive dark house at night. The United States owns some of the best flashlights in the world, But the house has too many rooms. China's navy has grown. Its missile forces have expanded. Its shipyards can produce at frightening scale. In that kind of environment, the question is not only who has the best individual platform, the question is who can sustain presence across the map without exhausting themselves. AUKUS helps answer that. If Australia becomes a real nuclear-powered submarine operator, then the alliance gains more hidden eyes, more patrol capacity, more maintenance depth, and more uncertainty for any adversary. The adversary must ask, is that contact American, British, or Australian? Where did it come from? How long has it been there? What else is nearby? In deterrence, doubt is valuable. AUKUS manufactures doubt. There is a quiet reason submarines are so central to this story. Surface ships can be seen. Air bases can be mapped. Satellites can watch ports, runways, missile sites, and ship movements. But submarines live in the hard part of warfare. They live where detection is painful, slow, and uncertain. The ocean is not transparent. Sound bends. Temperature layers distort. Seafloor terrain creates acoustic shadows. A submarine can turn the ocean into a hiding place, and a nuclear-powered submarine can carry that hiding place across enormous distances. That makes it one of the few tools that can still threaten an advanced enemy even when the air is crowded with missiles and satellites are staring from orbit. For Australia, that matters because geography is both a gift and a prison. Australia is far from many threats, but also far from many fights it might need to influence. A conventional submarine can defend approaches in nearby waters, but a nuclear-powered submarine can operate across the wider Indo Pacific. It can patrol choke points. It can watch naval movements. It can create risk for enemy surface fleets. It can support intelligence collection. It can make an adversary spend more time protecting itself, even if no shot is fired. That last part is crucial. The best submarine does not always need to attack. Sometimes its power is psychological. It forces caution. It slows planning. It makes commanders wonder whether the water beneath them is empty or alive. AUKUS is America helping Australia build that kind of invisible pressure, not because America is retiring from the region, but because it wants the region to contain more allied shadows. Now look at the timeline, because the timeline tells you why this is so hard. AUKUS is not a one-step plan. It is a ladder. First, more American and British submarines visit Australia. That sounds simple, but it is not. Every visit teaches ports, crews, regulators, engineers, and commanders how nuclear submarine operations feel in real life. Then comes rotational presence, with Allied submarines operating from Western Australia. That is not just symbolism. It means infrastructure. It means maintenance routines. It means security protocols. It means Australian personnel learning inside the living bloodstream of American and British undersea warfare. Before Australia can own the capability, it must learn how to host it. Before it can host it safely, it must build the culture around it. Then comes the bridge. Australia is expected to receive Virginia-class submarines from the United States in the 2030s. This is meant to prevent a capability gap before the future SSN AUKUS arrives. But a bridge is only useful if both sides are strong. On one side, Australia must prepare crews, bases, laws, safety systems, and industry. On the other side, America must have enough submarines to sell without weakening itself. That is where the plan becomes tense. The United States needs more attack submarines for its own fleet. Its shipyards are under pressure. Its maintenance backlog matters. Its production rate matters. So AUKUS is not just a question of diplomacy. It is a question of steel, labor, nuclear expertise, and calendar reality. The promise is strategic. The bottleneck is industrial." End quote. And in modern warfare, the factory floor can be as important as the front line. This is where the phrase force multiplier becomes real. A force multiplier is something that makes an existing force more powerful without simply adding more of the same thing. Night vision multiplies infantry. Tankers multiply aircraft, satellites multiply precision weapons, alliances multiply geography. AUKUS is an alliance force multiplier because it does not only add Australian submarines to the map, it adds Australian ports, Australian crews, Australian industry, Australian political commitment, British design expertise, American combat systems, shared training, shared standards. and shared deterrence. It turns three separate military machines into something closer to one distributed undersea system. Imagine one boxer fighting in a ring. He may be strong, but he has only two hands and one body. Now imagine he still throws his own punches, but suddenly he also has a trainer reading the opponent, a cut man repairing damage, another fighter controlling distance, and a team blocking exits. That is what Allied power does when it works. AUKUS is not America replacing its submarine fleet with Australia's. It is America trying to make the entire Allied position harder to target. If an adversary wants to pressure the United States, it must now think about Australia. If it wants to pressure Australia, it must think about the United States and Britain. If it wants to dominate the undersea environment, it must account for more ports, more patrol routes, more crews, and more uncertainty. AUKUS takes deterrence and gives it extra legs. But this is not charity, and that matters. America gets something in return. It gets a stronger ally in a critical location. It gets a future submarine partner operating similar systems. It gets more Allied maintenance depth. It gets political signaling that the Indo Pacific is not just an American problem. It gets access, familiarity, and resilience. In military terms, access is gold. A base is not just a place on a map. It is a shorter supply line, a faster response time, a safer repair option, and a message to everyone watching. Western Australia is especially important because it opens a southern angle into the Indo Pacific. It is not sitting directly on the first island chain. It is not as exposed as forward bases closer to China. It is deep enough to matter and distant enough to complicate enemy planning. This is why the phrase, someone else's submarine fleet, is almost misleading. In an alliance, someone else's fleet can still serve your strategic design. If Australian submarines patrol the same ocean, share intelligence, use interoperable systems, and complicate the same adversary's planning, then they become part of a wider deterrent web. Not controlled by America, like a remote control toy. Not identical to American boats, but aligned. Think of it like a neighborhood where one house installs a fire alarm, another gets a water pump, and another trains emergency responders. Each house is still sovereign. Each owner still makes decisions. But the whole street becomes harder to burn down. AUKUS is that logic at nuclear submarine scale. Sovereignty remains politically sensitive, and it should. But the strategic idea is clear. If Australia becomes harder to intimidate, America's position becomes harder to crack. There is also a message hidden inside the technology itself. Nuclear-powered submarines say, "We are planning for decades." They are not short-term tools. They require long training pipelines. They require specialized shipyards. They require safety systems that outlive governments. They require budgets that survive elections. When a country commits to them, it is not making a weekend purchase. It is building an institution. That is why AUKUS sends a signal that is bigger than the first boat. It tells the region that the United States, Britain, and Australia are trying to lock themselves into a long-term defense architecture. Not a temporary reaction, not a press conference alliance, a structure. This is powerful because deterrence is partly about convincing the other side that you will still be there later. A temporary deployment can be waited out. A political speech can fade. A ship visit can end. But a submarine program creates routes, training routes, industrial routes, legal routes, port routes, workforce routes. Once those routes grow deep, reversing the strategy becomes harder. That is the point. AUKUS is not just designed to produce submarines. It is designed to make strategic withdrawal more expensive. If Australia invests in crews, shipyards, nuclear stewardship, and allied integration, then the alliance becomes more sticky. It becomes harder to unplug. And for a region worried about whether America will stay engaged, that stickiness matters. AUKUS says the alliance is not just visiting, it is building machinery. Now comes the uncomfortable part. AUKUS could fail, or at least fall short. Not because the idea is weak, but because the execution is brutal. Building nuclear-powered submarines is not like scaling a software app. You cannot hire 10 more engineers and suddenly double output. You need specialized welders, nuclear-qualified workers, long lead components, reactor expertise, dry docks, suppliers, quality control, testing, certification, security, and because submarines must be quiet, Every mistake matters. A noisy submarine is not just less effective. It is a giant investment that gives away its own hiding place. Silence is not decoration. Silence is survival. The United States already struggles to build Virginia-class submarines fast enough. Britain has its own submarine industrial pressures. Australia must create a nuclear-powered submarine ecosystem almost from scratch. That means AUKUS is a strategic race against industrial reality. The adversary does not need to sink the plan. It only needs the plan to arrive late, over budget, or politically weakened. Delay becomes a weapon. Workforce shortage becomes a weapon. Public confusion becomes a weapon. If voters do not understand why the program matters, the cost starts to look insane. If shipyards cannot keep pace, the timeline starts to look fictional. If sovereignty concerns grow, the alliance story becomes fragile. This is the danger. AUKUS is meant to multiply strength, but complexity can multiply weakness too. The sovereignty question is one of the most important parts of the episode. Australia wants a sovereign capability. That means Australian submarines, Australian crews, Australian command decisions, and an Australian ability to operate without being merely an extension of another navy. But nuclear submarine capability is so difficult and so dependent on allied technology that sovereignty becomes layered. You can own the boat, but depend on foreign design. You can crew the boat, but train in foreign systems. You can command the boat, but rely on shared intelligence. You can build the yard, but need allied suppliers. So the question is not simple. It is not sovereign or not sovereign. It is sovereign enough for what mission, under what pressure, and with what dependencies. Think of it like learning to fly a high-performance jet that your closest friend helped design, maintain, and upgrade. You may be the pilot. You may choose the route. But your freedom depends on fuel, spare parts, software, training, and the maintenance culture behind the aircraft. That does not make the capability fake. It makes it interdependent. Modern military power is full of interdependence. NATO works this way. Intelligence alliances work this way. Missile defense works this way. The real question is whether interdependence creates strength or vulnerability. AUKUS bets that trusted interdependence creates strength. Critics worry that it may narrow Australia's choices in a crisis. Both concerns are real, and that tension is exactly why the story matters. A submarine can hide underwater, but the politics around it cannot. The China question sits underneath everything, even when officials use careful language. AUKUS is not only about one country, but it is impossible to separate it from the changing balance of power in the Indo Pacific. China has built a larger navy, expanded missile forces, and pushed more assertively into maritime spaces. The United States still has enormous military advantages, but distance is unforgiving. An aircraft carrier can be threatened by missiles. Air bases can be targeted. Surface ships can be tracked. But submarines remain among the hardest assets to find and neutralize. That makes them central to any strategy that wants to survive in a high-threat region. From Beijing's perspective, AUKUS looks like encirclement by another name. From Washington's perspective, it looks like deterrence. From Canberra's perspective, it looks like insurance against a future where distance no longer protects Australia the way it once did. Those three interpretations can exist at the same time. That is how geopolitics works. One side's shield is another side's cage. One side's stability is another side's containment. AUKUS does not remove this tension. It sharpens it. But the strategic logic is cold. If China knows that a crisis could involve not just American submarines, but British and Australian undersea forces as well, then every plan becomes harder. More uncertainty enters the equation, and uncertainty, if managed carefully, can prevent war by making victory look too expensive. Pillar 2 is the part many people ignore, but it may become just as important as the submarines. Pillar 1 is steel. Pillar 2 is the nervous system. It includes work on advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, cyber, quantum, electronic warfare, hypersonics, and undersea systems. In plain language, Pillar 2 asks a simple question. What if the three countries do not only share platforms, but also share the technologies that decide how future wars are sensed, processed, jammed, and fought? If Pillar 1 is about where submarines can go, Pillar 2 is about what the alliance can see, understand, and do once they get there. This matters because the future of undersea warfare will not be just submarine versus submarine. It will involve seabed sensors, autonomous underwater vehicles, AI-assisted acoustic analysis, satellite links, unmanned systems, cyber attacks, and electronic deception. A submarine may still be the king of stealth, but kings now need networks. Imagine a submarine receiving cleaner intelligence because allied AI systems filtered ocean noise faster. Imagine unmanned underwater vehicles scouting ahead. Imagine quantum sensing changing detection methods. Imagine cyber operations blinding the systems that hunt submarines. Pillar 2 is the attempt to build that future together, but it also carries a warning. Technology cooperation sounds easy in speeches, then gets slowed by export controls, classification rules, bureaucracy, and national industries protecting their turf. The alliance may dream at software speed, but governments often move at paperwork speed. The industrial side of AUKUS may be the least glamorous and most decisive part. Viewers see submarines. Strategists see shipyards. A submarine fleet is not only built once, it is sustained forever. Every patrol creates wear. Every system needs maintenance. Every crew needs rotation. Every upgrade must be integrated. Every reactor safety process must be respected. This means the real AUKUS question is not, can Australia get a few boats? The real question is, can Australia build and sustain the ecosystem that makes those boats useful for decades? A submarine without sustainment is a trophy. A submarine with sustainment is a strategic instrument. That is why Osborne in South Australia and facilities in Western Australia matter so much. They are not just construction projects. They are the physical skeleton of a future undersea force. They need workers who do not yet exist at scale. They need suppliers that can meet nuclear standards. They need schools, apprenticeships, security clearances, inspectors, planners, and managers who understand that submarines are unforgiving machines. This is where AUKUS becomes less like a military deal and more like building a small industrial civilization. The alliance can announce the destination, but the workforce must walk there, one skill at a time. If the training pipeline is weak, the fleet is weak. If the supplier base is thin, the fleet is fragile. If maintenance lags, readiness collapses. The ocean will not care how good the strategy sounded. There is also a money story, and it cannot be ignored. Nuclear-powered submarines are expensive because they are not just vehicles. They are floating national infrastructure. The cost includes boats, bases, training, safety, security, workforce, waste management, industrial investment, and decades of sustainment. This is why critics look at AUKUS and see a giant financial gamble. They ask whether Australia is spending too much on too few platforms. They ask whether the money could buy more drones, missiles, cyber capabilities, surface ships, air defense, or conventional submarines. These are not stupid questions. In defense strategy, every dollar says no to something else. But supporters answer with a different logic. They argue that not every capability can be replaced by cheaper mass. A drone can be useful. A missile can be deadly. But neither can quietly patrol thousands of miles from home for long periods while carrying sensors, weapons, and strategic ambiguity. The submarine is expensive because it solves a rare problem. It gives a middle power, like Australia long-range undersea reach in a dangerous region. The real debate is whether that rare problem is worth the cost. Think of it like buying a fireproof vault. Most days, it does nothing. It just sits there, expensive and silent. But if the fire comes, the vault's value is suddenly obvious. AUKUS is a vault strategy. The danger is that the vault must be built before anyone knows exactly when the fire will arrive. AUKUS also changes how we should think about American power. For decades, people often imagined American military dominance as a giant machine centered on the United States, with allies plugged into it. But the future may be more distributed. The United States still matters most, but it wants allied nodes that can share the burden. Japan modernizes. South Korea strengthens. The Philippines becomes strategically relevant again. Australia becomes an undersea hub. Britain returns to the Indo Pacific in a more focused way. This is not empire in the old sense. It is a network. And networks survive pressure better than single towers. A single tower can be targeted. A network forces the adversary to solve many problems at once. That is the strategic beauty of AUKUS. It does not create one giant base that can be held at risk. It creates more routes, more partnerships, more maintenance possibilities, more shared knowledge, and more political commitment. It makes the allied system less brittle. But networks have a weakness too. They require trust. If trust breaks, the network slows. If one partner changes political direction, the network shakes. If export controls block technology sharing, the network clogs. If budgets shrink, the network starves. AUKUS is not a magic shield. It is more like a nervous system. Powerful when signals move smoothly, dangerous when signals are delayed, deadly if the body and brain stop trusting each other. Now imagine a future crisis. Not a war, just a crisis. A Chinese naval task group moves through contested waters. Satellites watch. Aircraft patrol. Surface ships maneuver carefully. Diplomats speak in controlled sentences. Markets tremble. No one wants to fire first. In that moment, the visible forces matter, but the invisible forces may matter more. Somewhere, perhaps, an allied submarine is already listening. Maybe American. Maybe British, maybe Australian, maybe no one knows. That uncertainty changes behavior. It makes commanders more cautious. It makes escalation less clean. It turns the water itself into a question mark. This is the heart of deterrence. Deterrence is not about looking strong in a parade. It is about shaping the enemy's private calculation. Can they win quickly? Can they control the risk? Can they keep the conflict limited? Can they protect their fleet? Can they hide their own submarines? Can they move forces without being tracked? AUKUS attacks those questions. Not with a single weapon, but with an alliance architecture that makes the answers worse for the other side. The goal is not to make war inevitable. The goal is to make aggression feel like stepping into a dark room where the floor may not exist. Submarines are perfect for that because they do not need to be seen to be believed. In fact, their power often grows because they are not seen at all. But there is a moral and political edge here. If alliances become force multipliers, they also become risk multipliers. Australia gains protection, but may also become more entangled in American strategy. The United States gains depth, but must share sensitive technology and depend on allied political continuity. Britain gains relevance, but must stretch a submarine industrial base that already faces pressure. Each partner gets something. Each partner pays something. This is the part of alliances that speeches smooth over. An alliance is not just friendship. It is a trade of fears. You accept some of my dangers. I accept some of yours. Together, we hope the combined fear prevents something worse. For Australia, the hardest question is not whether submarines are powerful. They are. The question is what kind of country Australia becomes while building them. A country with nuclear stewardship responsibilities. A country with deeper ties to U.S. war planning. A country whose ports may matter in a major Indo Pacific crisis. A country that must explain to its citizens why a submarine program running across decades is worth the cost. That explanation cannot be lazy. It cannot just say, "Trust us." Democracies need strategic patience, but strategic patience needs public understanding. If the public sees only a giant bill, AUKUS weakens. If the public understands the map, the timeline, and the deterrence logic, AUKUS has a chance to survive the politics. So why is America helping build someone else's submarine fleet? Because the next era of military power is not just about owning the sharpest sword. It is about making sure the sword can be carried, repaired, hidden, and supported across a huge theater. The United States has unmatched undersea expertise, but it faces scale problems. Australia has geography, political alignment, and a need for reach. Britain has design heritage and a role in the next generation SSN AUKUS program. Put them together, And the alliance tries to create something none of them can create as efficiently alone. Not just boats, a distributed undersea enterprise. That phrase matters. Distributed undersea enterprise. It sounds cold, but it explains the whole story. The submarine is the visible product. The enterprise is the real weapon. Shared training, shared standards, shared supply chains, shared maintenance, shared technology, shared habits of operating together before crisis arrives. In a war, you do not want to exchange business cards for the first time. You want muscle memory. You want engineers who already know the part, commanders who already understand the rhythm, crews who already trust procedures, ports that already know the safety rules. AUKUS is trying to build that muscle memory before the emergency, because when the emergency comes, there may not be time to learn. The final irony is that AUKUS is both futuristic and old-fashioned. The futuristic part is obvious. AI, hypersonics, quantum, electronic warfare, nuclear-powered submarines, undersea drones, integrated combat systems. But the old-fashioned part is even deeper. It is about shipyards. Geography, trust, skilled labor, patience, political will. The same ingredients that decided power in older eras still matter. The tools have changed, but the foundations have not. A country that cannot build, maintain, or sustain its weapons does not really own them. An alliance that cannot coordinate its industries is weaker than its slogans. A strategy that cannot survive time is not strategy, it is theater. That is why AUKUS will be judged slowly. Not by the first headline, not by the first ceremony, not even by the first submarine visit. It will be judged by whether Australia becomes truly sovereign-ready, by whether American shipyards can increase production, by whether Britain delivers SSN AUKUS without crippling delay, by whether Pillar 2 becomes real technology, not just working groups. By whether the alliance can explain itself to voters for 30 years. The enemy of AUKUS is not only China, it is drift, bureaucratic drift, industrial drift, political drift, budget drift. The ocean rewards seriousness. It punishes fantasy. AUKUS is one of the most ambitious allied defense projects of the century, and ambition is only useful if it hardens into execution. So the answer to the title is this. America is helping build someone else's submarine fleet because, in the Indo Pacific, someone else's fleet can become part of America's shield. Not a puppet fleet, not a rented fleet, a sovereign allied fleet that makes the entire strategic map harder for an adversary to control. Australia gets reach. Britain gets a future submarine partnership. America gets depth. The alliance gets more shadows in the water. And the Indo-Pacific gets a new layer of deterrence that is hard to see, hard to target, and hard to ignore. But the real ending is not triumphant. It is conditional. If AUKUS works, it could become a model for 21st century allied power, not just sharing weapons, but sharing industrial strength, technical knowledge, and operational geography. If it fails, it will become a warning about what happens when strategy outruns shipyards. That is the lesson. Modern warfare is not won only by the country with the best weapons. It is won by the system that can keep those weapons alive, connected, supplied, and trusted. AUKUS is trying to turn an alliance into a machine. And somewhere in the dark water of the future, the success or failure of that machine may decide whether deterrence holds before anyone hears the first shot. But there is one more layer underneath AUKUS that is easy to miss. It is not only about preparing for war, it is about making war harder to start. That sounds simple, but it is one of the most important ideas in military strategy. A weapon can be built to fight, but it can also be built to prevent fighting. A lock on a door is not there because you want a robbery. It is there because you want the robber to keep walking. A nuclear-powered submarine fleet works in a similar way. It does not need to sit in public view. It does not need to show off. Its value comes from the enemy never being completely sure where it is, what it has heard, what it can target, and how quickly it can respond. AUKUS adds more locks to more doors across the Indo Pacific. This is why submarines are so different from many other military tools. A missile battery sends a clear message. An aircraft carrier sends a visible message. A fighter squadron sends a fast message. But a submarine sends a silent message. It tells an adversary, "You may not know where the danger is, but you must behave as if it is close." That kind of uncertainty changes planning. It makes surprise attacks harder. It makes naval movements riskier. It makes commanders assign more ships, aircraft, sensors, and time to protection instead of aggression. AUKUS is not trying to make Australia a mini America. It is trying to create another silent center of gravity in the region, another place where Allied undersea power can grow. Another reason for an adversary to hesitate. And in a crisis, hesitation can be the difference between a warning and a war. Now think about the geography again, because geography is the hidden character in this entire story. The Indo Pacific is not one battlefield. It is a giant maze of islands, choke points, deep water, shallow seas, ports, straits, bases, and long supply routes. Some areas are perfect for hiding submarines. Some are dangerous because sound behaves differently. Some are narrow enough that traffic can be monitored. Some are so vast that even powerful navies can feel blind. AUKUS matters because it helps the alliance operate across this maze with more options. And in war, options are oxygen. The side with more options can breathe longer. The side with fewer options starts making desperate choices. Australia's location gives the alliance a southern anchor. That does not mean Australia is safe from everything. Modern missiles, cyber operations, espionage, and economic pressure can reach far. But compared with more forward bases, Australia offers depth. It gives Allied forces space to train, repair, rotate, and think. That depth matters if closer bases are threatened. It matters if Guam is under pressure. It matters if ships need somewhere less exposed to recover. It matters if submarines need a support hub that is not sitting directly beside the most dangerous waters. This is why AUKUS is not only about the boats that will one day fly the Australian flag, it is also about turning geography into usable military advantage. Australia has always been large. AUKUS tries to make it strategically larger. There is another quiet effect. AUKUS changes how smaller allies think about defense. For a long time, many countries relied on the idea that America would show up when things got serious. That model still matters, but it is no longer enough by itself. The future is asking allies to become more capable, more integrated, and more useful before a crisis begins. AUKUS is one of the strongest examples of that shift. Australia is not just buying protection, it is buying a role. That distinction is huge. Protection can make a country dependent. A role can make a country essential. This is the deeper alliance logic. America does not want partners who only wait for rescue. It wants partners who can shape the battlefield with it. Australia does not want to be a passive outpost. It wants the ability to influence events far from its coastline. Britain does not want to be a museum of past naval power. It wants to remain embedded in the most important strategic theater of the century. AUKUS gives each country a way to tell itself a bigger story. America says, "We are not alone." Australia says, "We are not just protected, we are capable." Britain says, "We still matter in the Indo Pacific." Those stories are not just political marketing. They shape budgets, training, doctrine, and public patience. Nations build what they believe they are becoming. But the hardest part of AUKUS may be cultural, not diplomatic culture, not public relations culture, operational culture. Nuclear submarine forces are built on habits that take decades to form. They are quiet communities, often hidden from public attention, where small errors can become enormous problems. A crew must trust procedures, engineers must trust standards, commanders must trust training. Regulators must trust safety systems, and everyone must understand that nuclear stewardship is not a slogan. It is a daily discipline. Australia is not just acquiring machines. It is entering a culture where precision is a moral requirement. This matters because a submarine fleet cannot be improvised. You cannot build a serious undersea force by buying hardware and hoping the human system catches up. The human system is the weapon. The crew listening in silence for hours. The maintenance worker checking a part no civilian will ever see. The officer making decisions with incomplete information under the sea. The analyst interpreting acoustic patterns that may be nothing or may be everything. AUKUS will succeed or fail on these details. The public will see launch ceremonies and budget numbers. The real test will happen in classrooms, simulators, docks, patrol routines, and after-action reviews. The Alliance is not only transferring technology, it is trying to transfer standards. And standards are harder to move than steel. Now zoom out to the industrial problem one more time. The West spent decades enjoying a world where industrial speed did not always feel urgent. Precision weapons were admired. Stealth platforms were celebrated. Small numbers of exquisite systems seemed enough because many wars were fought against weaker opponents. But great power competition punishes that mindset. It asks a brutal question. Can you build enough? Can you repair enough? Can you replace losses? Can you surge production? Can your supply chain survive pressure? AUKUS sits directly inside that question. It is a submarine plan, but it is also a stress test for the Western defense industrial base. If the United States cannot build enough Virginia-class boats, the early AUKUS pathway becomes harder. If Britain cannot manage its submarine workload, SSN AUKUS becomes harder. If Australia cannot train enough workers and crews, sovereign capability becomes harder. Every weak link pulls on the whole chain. This is why AUKUS is almost like a military gym membership for 3 countries. It forces them to lift heavier industrial weights, more shipyard capacity, more workforce training, more supplier depth, more nuclear expertise, more coordination. The pain is part of the point. A country does not discover industrial weakness during a war and then calmly fix it. By then, it is too late. AUKUS forces the weakness into the open before the crisis. That is uncomfortable, but useful. There is also an intelligence dimension that deserves attention. Submarines are not only shooters, they are listeners. They can collect information in places where other platforms may be too visible or too vulnerable. They can monitor naval movements, track acoustic signatures, observe patterns, and support wider intelligence networks. In the modern Indo Pacific, information is not a side mission. It is the beginning of the kill chain. The force that detects first, understands first, and decides first often controls the tempo. AUKUS gives the Alliance a chance to expand that undersea listening network through more capable partners. Think of the ocean as a dark room full of footsteps. Some footsteps are harmless, some are dangerous, some are trying not to be heard. The side with better ears can map the room without turning on the lights. Nuclear-powered submarines are among the best ears a Navy can have. But ears are even more powerful when connected to a brain. That brain is the Alliance network. Satellites, maritime patrol aircraft, undersea sensors, cyber intelligence, and command centers combining fragments into a picture. Pillar 2 could make this even more important if AI helps process huge amounts of undersea data faster. AUKUS is not just adding more submarines to the water. It is trying to improve the Alliance's ability to hear the room before the fight begins. Still, there is a danger in believing too much in invisible weapons. Submarines are powerful, but they are not magic. They can be hunted. They can suffer accidents. They can be delayed in maintenance. They can be limited by crew fatigue and political restrictions. They can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They can deter, but they cannot solve every military problem. A country that buys submarines still needs air defense, cyber resilience, logistics, missiles, diplomacy, and economic strength. AUKUS must not become a golden hammer that makes every strategic problem look like a nail. This is especially important for Australia. A submarine fleet can project power far from home, but it does not automatically protect every port, cable, satellite link, or supply chain. Modern conflict can begin with cyber attacks, gray zone pressure, disinformation, trade punishment, seabed sabotage, or missile intimidation. Nuclear-powered submarines help with some parts of that world, but not all of it. So the smartest version of AUKUS is not submarine obsession. It is submarine integration. The boats must fit into a wider defense system. Long-range strike, northern bases, autonomous systems, intelligence sharing, hardened infrastructure, fuel security, ammunition stockpiles. Civil resilience. The submarine is the spear, but even a spear needs a hand, an arm, a body, and a brain. AUKUS also has a signaling problem with the wider region. Not every Indo Pacific country sees the world exactly the way Washington, Canberra, and London do. Some countries fear Chinese power, but also fear being forced to choose sides. Some want American presence, but not open confrontation. Some welcome deterrence, but worry about escalation. That means AUKUS must be explained carefully. If it looks like a closed military club for Anglo powers, it can create suspicion. If it looks like a stabilizing contribution to regional balance, it becomes easier to accept. The difference depends on diplomacy, not just submarines. This is why language matters. AUKUS supporters often talk about peace, stability, deterrence, and a free and open Indo Pacific. Those phrases can sound boring, but they are doing work. They are trying to frame the submarines as a shield, not a sword pointed recklessly across the ocean. But words alone are not enough. Regional countries will judge behavior. Does AUKUS increase transparency? Does it respect non-proliferation rules? Does it support regional security without bullying smaller states? Does it create reassurance or anxiety? Strategy is not only what you intend, it is also what others believe you intend. A submarine can be silent, but an alliance cannot. It must constantly communicate why it exists. The non-proliferation issue is one of the most sensitive parts of AUKUS. Australia is not getting nuclear weapons. The submarines are supposed to be conventionally armed. But they will be nuclear-powered, and that creates a special challenge. Nuclear propulsion uses nuclear material in a military setting, even when the weapons are not nuclear. That makes the arrangement technically legal if handled correctly, but politically delicate. The alliance must prove that it can build this capability without weakening global non-proliferation norms. In simple terms, it must show the world that this is not a backdoor to nuclear weapons. That is why safeguards, transparency, and international trust matter so much. AUKUS cannot afford to look sloppy here. If other countries believe the deal creates a loophole, they may use it as an excuse for their own programs. If the International Atomic Energy Agency process is seen as weak, critics will grow louder. If the communication is poor, the story can shift from deterrence to proliferation risk. This is another example of how AUKUS is more than a military project. It is a legal, diplomatic, technical, and reputational project. The alliance must build submarines and credibility at the same time. One without the other is dangerous. A silent boat is useful. A silent explanation is not. Now imagine the maintenance reality 20 years from now. An Australian nuclear-powered submarine returns from patrol. The public may never know where it went. The crew steps off exhausted. The boat needs inspection. Systems need updates. Parts need replacement. Data needs analysis. Lessons need to be absorbed. Another crew must prepare. Another patrol must be planned. This cycle is the real life of a submarine force. Not dramatic launches, not cinematic music. Cycles. Patrol, maintain, train, upgrade, repeat. A navy that masters the cycle becomes dangerous. A navy that fails the cycle owns expensive metal. That cycle is why AUKUS cannot be judged by the number of submarines alone. 3 boats with high readiness may matter more than more boats stuck in maintenance. Crews with deep experience may matter more than impressive brochures. A reliable supply chain may matter more than a louder speech. In undersea warfare, readiness is hidden until it is needed. A country can look strong on paper and be weak at sea. The reverse can also be true. AUKUS must create real readiness, not ceremonial readiness. The question will not be, how many submarines did Australia acquire? The question will be, how many can quietly leave port, stay on mission, return safely, and do it again without breaking the force? AUKUS also reveals something bigger about the future of American alliances. The old model was often hub and spokes, America in the center, allies connected to America. But now the spokes are starting to connect more with each other. Australia and Britain, Japan and Australia, the Philippines and the United States, NATO countries and Indo Pacific partners. Technology, exercises, logistics, and intelligence are creating a thicker web. AUKUS is one of the strongest threads in that web, but it is not the only one. The real strategic picture is a network slowly becoming denser. A dense network is hard to defeat because pressure in one place can be absorbed by support from another, but it is also harder to manage. Every partner has different politics, budgets, threat perceptions, and red lines. America may want speed. Australia may want sovereignty. Britain may want industrial benefit. Regional states may want reassurance. Defense companies may want contracts. Bureaucracies may want control. This is why Allied strategy can feel slow and messy. But messy does not mean weak. Sometimes messiness is the price of legitimacy. A dictatorship can move quickly because fewer people can say no. An alliance moves slowly because trust must be negotiated. AUKUS is betting that negotiated trust, once built, can outlast fast authoritarian decision-making. The battlefield AUKUS is preparing for may never happen, and that would be the best outcome. This is the strange thing about deterrence. If it succeeds, it can look unnecessary. People may ask why so much money was spent on submarines that never fired. Why so much effort went into bases that never saw combat. Why so many crews trained for a war that never came. But that is like asking why a bridge needed strong foundations after it did not collapse. The absence of disaster does not prove the preparation was useless. Sometimes it proves the preparation worked. Still, democracies struggle with this. They like visible results. Schools built, hospitals opened, roads repaired. Submarines are different. Their success may be invisible. A patrol that prevents miscalculation is invisible. Intelligence that helps avoid escalation is invisible. A commander who chooses caution because an Allied submarine might be nearby is invisible. This makes AUKUS politically vulnerable. Its costs will be visible. Its benefits may be hidden. That gap can become dangerous unless leaders explain the logic clearly and repeatedly. The public does not need every classified detail, but it does need the basic map. Why the Indo Pacific matters, why submarines matter, why alliances matter, why waiting until danger arrives is too late. Without that explanation, the strategy becomes an expensive mystery. There is one final military concept that brings the whole episode together: strategic depth. Strategic depth means having room to absorb pressure, recover, maneuver, and continue operating. On land, it can mean territory. At sea, it can mean bases, logistics, distance, and hidden routes. In politics, it can mean allies. AUKUS gives the United States strategic depth by strengthening Australia. It gives Australia strategic depth by tying it deeper into American and British technology. It gives Britain strategic depth by keeping it connected to the Indo Pacific power balance. The submarine is the tool, but depth is the prize. Depth matters because first blows may be devastating in future war. Missiles could hit bases. Cyber attacks could disrupt networks. Satellites could be targeted. Ports could be threatened. Supply chains could fracture. The side that survives the first shock and keeps operating has an enormous advantage. AUKUS is partly about surviving shock. More locations, more skills, more industrial cooperation, more undersea uncertainty, more Allied commitment. It is not a guarantee. Nothing is. But it makes the alliance less fragile. Think of it like adding compartments to a ship. If one compartment floods, the whole vessel does not sink. AUKUS is compartmentalizing Allied power across geography, technology, and industry. It is making the ship harder to kill. So when people ask whether AUKUS is worth it, the honest answer is not simple. It depends on execution. If the shipyards fail, it becomes a monument to overreach. If the workforce pipeline fails, it becomes a beautiful plan without enough hands. If the politics fail, it becomes another strategy document that aged badly. If Pillar 2 gets trapped in bureaucracy, the technology promise fades. If Australia never achieves real operational confidence, sovereignty concerns grow. The risks are real. Anyone who says otherwise is selling a fantasy. But the upside is also real. If AUKUS works, it gives the alliance a long-term undersea advantage in the most important maritime region on Earth. It gives Australia a serious deterrent reach. It gives America a stronger southern anchor. It gives Britain a meaningful role in a future submarine ecosystem. It gives the wider Allied network more resilience. And maybe most importantly, it tells any adversary that time is not only working in their favor. The democracies can still build. They can still coordinate. They can still share secrets. They can still commit to hard projects across decades. In a world obsessed with speed, AUKUS is a slow bet, but some slow bets shape history because they build the infrastructure of power before the crisis arrives. In the end, AUKUS is not really a submarine story. It is a story about how power changes when geography, industry, trust, and technology are fused together. America is not building someone else's submarine fleet because it has too many submarines. It is doing it because the map is too large, the threat is too complex, and the future is too uncertain for one country to carry the full burden alone. Australia is not entering this deal because submarines are glamorous. It is entering because distance is no longer enough protection. Britain is not joining because nostalgia can power a navy. It is joining because relevance now requires integration. The old image of power was a lone superpower crossing the ocean with overwhelming force. The new image is quieter. A hidden submarine leaving port, a shipyard training workers, a command center sharing data, a port in Western Australia preparing for rotations, a British design team shaping the next hull, an American combat system being integrated into an allied future. None of it looks dramatic by itself, but together, it becomes a machine for deterrence. That is the real meaning of AUKUS. It is an attempt to make an alliance behave like a force multiplier before the world finds out whether deterrence was strong enough. Because if the submarines ever have to prove their power in combat, then the real goal has already failed. The best ending for AUKUS is silence. No war, no launch order, no breaking news. Just enough hidden strength beneath the water that everyone decides the cost of aggression is too high.